In the name of our loving and liberating and life-giving God, amen. Please have a seat. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming out on such a chilly day. When I read the gospel for this morning earlier this week, I was tempted to make a joke about the uses of salt being trampled underfoot, having recently come from Minnesota, where I spent countless amounts of money on salt every winter season to trample underfoot so that we did not slip around on all of the ice and the snow. But that's not what I'm really going to talk about today. And as much as it's tempting to think about that song, "This Little Light of Mine, I'm going to let it shine," today we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this gospel that I think we know so well. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. How many of you have ever taken a deep dive onto social media or the internet or some sort of even tangible, like newspaper, sort of doom scrolling about the latest bad thing that's happened in the world? Yes, I totally just saw some heads nod, right? How many of you have ever done that, right? And in the age of the internet, isn't it so easy to do? It's so easy to get so caught up. I see some big smiles, like people know exactly what I'm talking about. It is so easy to get really, really caught up in all of the tough things that happen all across the world. There's a phrase called, basically called like trauma fatigue or empathy fatigue that has come out in our modern times because of that phenomenon. The fact that as the internet has made its way to all the corners of the earth and into our hands when we carry these basically computers around in our pockets, because we are bombarded by information all the time, we are overloaded by the pains of the world. I don't know about you, but sometimes for me, I have to be really, really intentional about just putting that stuff away. Because if I were to dwell in all of the painful things all the time, my life would feel like I was just living in darkness. This morning's gospel tells us to not let that sort of thing happen. There are many ways that we can take these phrases, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. There are many things that we can do with this theologically, but this morning, what this gospel speaks to me is that we are called to not let the pain of the world overtake us. We are called to not allow all of those things to become so burdensome to us that we cannot let our light shine. Because the world needs light, and the world needs salt. In staff meeting this week, we were talking about the gospel, and Venny said, salt gives us flavor. And then someone else said, yeah, it spices things up. When we are so burdened and weary by holding all of the pain of the world around us on a regular basis, we lose our capacity to bring that flavor to the world. We lose our capacity to bring the light that is necessary into the darkness. And this morning's gospel, I think, is a call to us to put those burdens down so that we can be the light and be the salt. When we heard the reading from Isaiah, I think Isaiah understood this same thing that Matthew is talking about, because Isaiah is talking about the same sort of thing happening in the community, that people are living in a way that should be the way of righteousness, but what it's doing is not giving them life. That the way that people are living is a way that is actually keeping them in darkness. And Isaiah is saying, we're called to do something different. We're called to put our trust in a God that is a God of love, that calls us to life and light and abundance. We are called to be the people who are in the midst of that darkness, the bearers of the light. We are called to be the people who have removed that yoke, who have stopped pointing that finger, who have stopped speaking of evil, so that we can feed the hungry, so that we can clothe the sick, so that we can satisfy the needs of the afflicted. That's what Isaiah says to us. We have to take off those burdens and live as people of the light, so that, as Isaiah says, your light shall rise in the darkness and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and will satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. You shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water, whose waters never fail. We, as God's people, are built up in those ways by being people who live as salt and light, by being people who understand that righteousness is about the way that we interact with the world and with one another, and not about praying a certain number of times a day. In the words of the very end of our reading from Isaiah, we are told, I think, what it means in our lives when we live as that salt and that light. Isaiah says, your ancient ruins will be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. The repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. That is what we are called to do as people who live as kingdom people, as people who live believing that God's promise of life is indeed a promise for each and every one of us and for the whole world. So I urge you to take whatever it is that is burdening you or weighing you down, whatever it is that might be holding you back from being the salt and the light, to attend to it in a way that you need to, but then to put it aside and get to work, because we know that the streets are broken and that many places have been breached. Amen.